in a non-castigating, non-critical, non-condemning, non-indicting environment where they would be loved, educated, nurtured, and empowered in their journey in Islam. So I ask you, and I remind myself, that we keep the culture of Islam alive, and we remember that that is the mission statement of this organization. I would also like to recognize I.S.L.A.M, who is with us from beautiful Colorado, and he happens to be Mason's blood brother, her other brother from another mother. And I love Anas dearly, have known him for many years, and we're very happy to have you with us today, brother. Yeah. So let me just remind you that we will not have class next Sunday. Inerrant and I will travel on Friday to beautiful Boston, where we will get to touch and kiss and pinch our twin granddaughters for the first time. And so we will pray for you as we are traveling. So remember, there will be no class here next Sunday. No class on the 20th. And so that will mean that will be the 21st. The following Sunday, I believe, is May the 5th. And that will be the day, inshallah. No, I'm sorry. That will be Sunday, April the 28th. So we will have one more class then before the month of Ramadan begins, inshallah. And so I would remind you, those of you who have made your spiritual goals for the month, to review that every day, to look at that decision that I have made, that I want to achieve in this month of Ramadan. I would also ask you to continue to make dua for Taysir Kiwan, who has 4-stage cancer, and I would ask you to pray for Naran's family. Her oldest sister's husband has dementia, and she actually sent Naran a message yesterday to say that she didn't think he would be living much longer. So if you would just please remember her family, we would appreciate that. I don't think there's anybody else that has asked me to make specific dua, but please continue to pray. I will be in Eastern Florida State on Monday and Tuesday this week lecturing, inshallah. And so I ask you to pray that as we are there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will touch the hearts of those people that hear about Islam. Inshallah, they will find their way to true guidance. So today, before I do the khutbah al-hajjah, I want to do some caveats, whisper these caveats to others whenever they come in late. It's important. I want them to hear this. What we're going to talk about today are some things that actually will affect you spiritually. And I want you to pay close attention to the context, because the context of this class, you'll get it when you listen, but I want you not to take it to an area that I'm not talking about, and you'll get it when I start talking about it. I just want to say that I wrote something on the board here. Did everybody see this or notice this? What is the opposite of fasting? So, inshallah, today you will begin to contemplate, ponder, and reflect what the opposite of fasting is. Okay? I'd really like you to spend some contemplative time focusing on what the opposite of fasting is. So without further ado, in alhamdulillah ta'ala, nahmaduhu, wa nasta'inuhu, wa nastaghfiruhu, wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina, wa min sayyiati amalina. ومن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Indeed, all praise is due to Allah. We praise Allah. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our soul and from our sinful deeds. Those who are guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one can misguide them. Those who are not guided by Allah, there is no guide for them. I bear witness that there is no God, there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his servant and messenger. O you who believe, revere Allah as Allah alone should be revered, and die not except as Muslims. Amma bad. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, I'm going to ask somebody to volunteer to click for me today. Are you going to do that, Mason? Are you going to do that, sweetie? You'll have to come over here. Last week, the thumb drive was left here, and so we don't have it. And so I'll have to get another clicker probably. So Kareem's going to do it? Okay, alhamdulillah. So I wrote up on the board here, what is the opposite of fasting? If you know the opposite of something, will it help you to understand the meaning of something in a deeper level?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Open the slide now?
Yes, please.
Go down to the very bottom one where it says, all the way to the very bottom of the screen. PowerPoint? Open PowerPoint. Yep. And click on review.
No, next slide.
Right here.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
And then next slide.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so fasting has its opposites. Eating, non-moderate eating, and non-halal eating. So I want to make it very clear that the subject matter today is not about dieting. I want to repeat it. The subject matter today is not about dieting. Has absolutely nothing to do with dieting, nor does it have anything to do with weight. Weight is a very, very negative subject. It's a subject that's very sensitive. Somehow, when I address this subject in Islam, because people have an issue with weight, they jump to the conclusion I'm talking about weight. I'm going to repeat it again. This lecture has absolutely nothing to do with weight. Did everybody hear that? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So, the opposite of fasting would be eating. According to Islam, there are rules about eating, and we're going to look at some of those rules today. So the opposite of fasting is eating too much or not in the way of the sunnah, leads to thunub, it leads to sins, which lead the heart in subtle spiritual ways to become rude, harsh, and hard. So remember, in the last lecture we talked about kaswa, a hardness of the heart, where in the heart there is this rudeness and harshness. Kafra to aql, gluttonous eating, leads to faqdu to aql, the loss of one's intellect, wisdom, or reason. These are simply, I want to remind you, Islamic teachings. Okay? Nothing to do with weight. Next slide, please. The term al-aql is derived from the verb aql or yaql. And what this is basically is going from fil madi to fil mudarik. So one is the base root of the word, which is always past tense, and then the next one that you see there is present tense. And then the third tense in Arabic is the command tense, which we don't have that here. Meaning reason, rationality, intellect, or intelligence, the antonym of which is al-hamakat. Okay? And if my Arabic is wrong, I ask you to correct me, please. I sometimes have a hard time. Al-hamaka, because that's tarmabuta, right? So you don't, okay. Which means stupidity or foolishness. So I want you to get an understanding that I am not talking about the aql, the brain. This is also called the aql, the brain. I am talking about the spiritual brain. Aristotle also taught that the brain was not up here, but it was in the heart. Al-Anbari, a famous Arabic language scholar, said, Al-Aql, intelligent, sane, or wise person. Now we see the direct article there. So the brain, the intelligent, the wise person, is the one who fastened upon his or her ideas and actions after careful excogitation, thinking, planning, or devising, derived from one's statement, Aqaltu al-Ba'ir, which means I bound the camel with the rope called Aql. Hope everybody stays with me here. This has to do, folks, with restraint. Is fasting not restraint? When I am fasting, I am restraining. If I am fasting my tongue from gossip, I am restraining my speech. If I am fasting my eyes from looking at something I should not look, I am restraining my eyes. Al-Aql is the one who withholds or restrains him or herself from doing that which is not suitable and befitting. And I have quoted the scholar here, Ibn al-Jawzi. The early Muslim scholars from among the companions of the Prophet, may Allah be pleased with all of them, and their disciples all gave various but related meanings of Al-Aql, which are summarized by Ibn Jawzi in his book Al-Azkiyya to 4 definitions. And I'm going to share those with you today, inshallah. Can we go to the next slide, please? Kareem? No, I need the next. Oh, okay. They just told me I needed the next one. Okay, the next one. Sorry, yes. Thank you. The first meaning is that which is used to describe that innate property of a person wherewith man and woman is prepared to receive, understand, and synthesize information as what distinguishes him or her from other living beings. So now I want us to look at this a minute. What is the innate property of the human being? Fitra. The innate nature, the innate property of the human being is fitra, which means it is the natural way of being. Is you have a self-reproaching soul that tells you, you have angels telling you, don't think that's a good idea what you're about to do. Maybe this is not a good place for me to be. That is the innate property I'm talking about. Who put that property there? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the purport of what scholars such as Imam Ahmed and Al-Muhasibi stated, who respectively described Al-Aql as an innate property of man and woman, or an inborn light, nur. So when you receive nur from Allah, which by the way Sister Nuran's name is Nuran, which means twice light. This light, is it like this kind of light that you see from the ceiling? No, it is an enlightenment. It's part of that spiritual intelligence, that spiritual aql that you're going to see today. And it is that light that causes you to perceive things. The same way that at night you have a light, a flashlight to help you see, you have the nur of Allah to guide you spiritually. You want to develop that. Next slide, please. The second meaning implies that which is used to designate self-evident things, to axiomatic truth, ilm al-daruri, in which both intelligent and dull-witted people are on par with one another. The third meaning of al-aql cited by him is that which is gained through experience, and the newly acquired experience is called aql. In the Greek, we have a word called gnosko. It means to know that you know that you know. And that means that you know by experience. So my question to you, and one that I would like you to ponder and reflect on, is what newly acquired experience am I going to have in this Ramadan? What newly acquired experience do I want to have with Allah today? What newly acquired experience do I want to have with Allah this week? what newly acquired, and on and on. Experience, folks, something that you gain a confidence in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, when we talk about the Shahada, when it becomes a conviction in your heart, we call it the Kalima. This means that I am convicted of the words. And this is verified in the Ahadith, where it says that when a person embraces Islam, Islam enters into this head, into this Aql, and as they practice, it moves into this Aql. So if you look at the 49 verses that I have listed for you, we're not going to go through all of them. I'll save you from that despair. You will see that the understanding that is being referred to is a spiritual understanding. It's not a cognitive understanding. The cognitive understanding is required, but it comes from here. It is alive in here. Next slide, please. The last meaning implies the inerrant principle by which one restrains his own self from his heart's vain desires. And this is really what we're looking at in the month of Ramadan. And of course, we are, I forgot to look today, 30, I'm going to guess, just about 32 or 3 days, I think, from Ramadan, if I remember correctly. 22. Okay, so remember, be looking at your goals every day. I usually write that down, and I usually have my calendar, my Islamic calendar. I want to repeat this because I'm going to want to discuss this at the end of class. The last meaning implies the inerrant principle by which one restrains his or her own self from his or her heart's vain desires. This is where the nafs comes in. So sometimes you will see that the word naf is translated soul. Sometimes you will see it translated as heart. But this is where you want to work. You want to work on your nafs, your lower desires, that lower part of yourself. In view of these meanings, Al-Aql generally centers on two things: the knowledge of merit and demerit of things, and then acting upon that knowledge. So if I have a knowledge of something in Islam and I do not obey it, would I be a person called Al-Aql? No. So these are the but category of people. I know that the Quran says so and so, but. As long as there's a but in your life, this kind of but, you will not be of the person of Al-Aql. In view of these meanings, Al-Aql generally centers on two things: the knowledge of merit and demerit of things, and then acting upon that knowledge. The person who grasps the perfectness and defectiveness of things, but refuses to act upon the knowledge acquired by him or her, is not wise. The term Al-Aql, therefore, does not suit them. When we talk about wisdom in Islam, the word hikmah, and most scholars say that one who has hikmah is one who applies the knowledge. And by applying the knowledge, you become wise. Next slide, please. To this end, Al-Aql implies the intellectual ability to comprehend evidence of factual knowledge. So let me stop a minute here. In Islam, what do we know? We know that you must give dalil. You must have evidences and proofs before you say something. Right? So, Al-Aql implies the intellectual ability to comprehend evidence of factual knowledge in information or a message received or discovered. It is used also to distinguish wisdom from folly, which is the ability in man or woman to be guided by the rule of wisdom. Aql is mentioned 49 times in the Quran. And I would invite you to take a picture of the next slide. And I would invite you to go back and read every one of those verses so that you get a deeper understanding of Al-Aql, and therefore you will be able to entertain that and to bring that into your heart and materialize and realize and manifest that in your life, inshallah. So it's not the next one. I think it's the next one. So let's just look at 2 verses. The translation, which means in Surah 67:10, and they will say, had we but listened or used our intelligence. Is this talking about the kind of intelligence that is tested on an IQ test? No, I'm not talking about IQ. I'm talking about Aql Q. I'm talking about how high is the intellect of my spiritual heart. We should not have been among the dwellers of fire. So there is in this verse, there is an indication that if I do not develop al-aql in my life, I will be among the dwellers of the blazing fire. Let's look at Surah 50 and verse 37. Verily therein is indeed a reminder for him or her who has a heart or gives ear while he or she is heedful. Is that ear talking about this ear? No, it's talking about the eyes and the ears of my intellect and my heart. That I see and I hear things the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to hear and see things. Next slide, please. And this is the slide that you might want to take a picture of. I encourage you to read every one of these verses so that you can get an understanding of what Aql is. And also, as you see below all of the listed verses that I put here for you, men and women of understanding is found 16 times in the Holy Quran. Is this talking about men and women who understand physics? Is this talking about men and women who understand psychology? This is talking about men and women who understand the revelation of Allah. They understand from their heart. Next slide, please. Miqdam ibn Ma'ad reported the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the son of Adam cannot fill a vessel worse than his or her stomach, as it is enough for him or her to take a few bites to straighten his or her back, strengthen his or her spine. If he or she cannot do it, then he or she may fill it with a third of his or her food, a third of his or her drink, and a third of his or her breath. So the sunnah is what? The son of Adam needs few morsels of food. All I'm talking about is what the Quran teaches us about eating. I'm not talking about dieting. I'm not talking about anybody's weight. That's not the issue here. In Surah 7, thank you Kareem, verse 31, and eat and drink, but waste not by extravagance. If you look at that sentence objectively, you're in an English class, and you break down that class, that sentence, that phrase, what is it telling you? That you are wasting and being extravagant if you eat more than your body needs. That's the teaching of Islam. I know that every time I teach this, people get defensive. And then if I happen to go out and eat with them afterwards, they're like hiding their plate. That's not what I'm trying to achieve here. I'm trying to love you enough that you know what Allah wants from you. And that you know the reward from this. And I beg you, I beseech you, I implore you to look at the rewards that you will hear in this lecture today. And to look at the deficits that you will have if you don't obey Allah. Aql is intellect of the soul. In these contexts and every one of these verses, intensive use of Quran causes awareness and intellect. Therefore, what do we know? What is recommended in the month of Ramadan? That we read 1 juz, 1/30th of the Quran every day. But folks, if you just read it like this, I saw Spot run. Spot jumped over the fence. Spot is brown. And then you go to whatever you're doing, you're not going to get a lot out of it. The reading of the Quran is the contemplation, the pondering, and the reflecting. And I would encourage you that it would be better for you as reverts to read 10 verses and look inside yourself for the intellect of the heart. what Allah wants you to know than it would be to read the 30th, and when they get done and I say, well, what did you learn? Oh, I don't know, I just read the juice. Avoidance of too much food causes awareness. Avoidance of too much food causes awareness. Spiritual acuity. In Surah 2, verse 3, who believe in the unseen, not unconsciously, establish prayer and spend out of what we provided for them. Aql in the Arabic language also means to restrain and to tie. The word aql, reason, does not etymologically have that in it. Because the rope with which we tie the camel is called an igal. Al-itgal al-aql. Because we tie the animal and with it, the animal is restrained. How do we restrain ourselves? When people wear a turban in windy weather in the Gulf countries in the Middle East, they put on an imama. And just, I wish I had one to show you. It's sort of usually black with some gold around it, and it holds on a man's scarf or a turban. And that holds it firmly to restrain it from flying in the wind. For a moment, contemplate, what does that mean to me spiritually? What does that mean to me spiritually? Some people, when they become Muslim, they get tossed by every wind of doctrine. Whatever Sheikh Yahoo and Sheikh Google says, they come to me, oh, Islam says this. They are blown about because they don't have the knowledge to hold them down or maybe to lift them up. They put an igal on the turban and it restrains it. Aql in the Arabic language, in the Quranic language, is aql and only aql. If it restrains us from indulging freely in our appetites and passions. I encourage you to look at yourself, at your nafs, and to contemplate on what are the biggest appetites I have. What are the things I'm passionate about that don't please Allah? What are the things that I am passionate about that are not in alignment with the Quran and Sunnah? Animals don't have aql. They don't measure the consequences of their deeds before they do them. This is part of that innate nature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to mankind. Other creations of Allah said, I don't want that. And man said, I'll take it. So we're talking about IQ versus Aql Q. One can have a very high intelligence quotient. You could be gifted or you could be a genius, but have an Aql Q that is very low. One might be capable of solving difficult calculus problems on a test, but have a low Aql Q. They just can't get the spiritual thing, or maybe they don't want to. Examples. One cannot restrain themselves from ice cream, biryani, lasagna, baba ganoush, pizza, makruba, potato chips, looking at the haram, listening to the haram. Can't restrain one's drives from committing the haram. These are the tests for our Aql Q. And these tests are gifts. But if we do not have the right knowledge, and we don't have that in our hearts, and we don't have taqwa, the fear of disappointing Allah, then we will never have Aql Q. Indulging the nafs through eating diminishes my Aql Q. The hearts that are attached to the appetites of this world, the dunya, their aql, their minds. Is it talking about this mind? No. This mind is not what's going to stand before Allah. It's the soul, the intellect that's in that soul, that understanding. The hearts that are attached to the appetites of the dunya, of the world, their aql, their minds, their drives, their intellect are veiled from Allah. I want you to really look at this, folks. Because if you do not get a hold of your passions in life, your appetites, you are being veiled from Allah. I didn't write this, by the way. High levels of spiritual awareness and intimacy with Allah will not be attained without eating very moderately and fasting a lot with the proper conditions and requirements Monday and Thursday and the 3 days of the Islamic months in the middle. Study finds fasting for 3 days. Next slide, please. No, I need the next one. Thank you, Kareem. Study finds fasting for 3 days can regenerate the entire immune system. Health and Wellness, March the 12th, 2018 article. I invite you to read it. Not that I want to trump the knowledge of Allah with worldly knowledge, but it is a great reinforcer. Fasting triggers stem cell regeneration of damaged old immune system. University of Southern California News, June of 2004. Fasting presses the body's reset switch and gets rid of damaged cells. Miriam Stoppard, Lifetime, UK's best-selling family and most trusted child care expert, said this. Recent research posited that fasting flips the regenerative switch, which promotes stem cells to create new white blood cells, which fight infection, especially for patients whose systems have been damaged by chemotherapy. Eating too much inhibits the thinking process and physical activity. If we are studying when filled to capacity with physical food, we will discover the inner dimensions. Will we discover the inner dimensions of a Quranic verse? If I go to an all-you-can-eat banquet and I eat like a horse, as we say, how much will I be able to concentrate on the Quran when I go and sit down to read it? I will probably want to take a nap. If I eat to capacity, I don't want to work for anybody or anything. I just want to sleep. A lot of people are shaking their head like this. If we are studying when filled to capacity with physical food, will we discover the inner dimensions of the Quranic verses? How does fasting affect the brain? In lab animals, fasting stimulates the production of a protein in nerve cells called brain-deprived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. The protein plays critical roles in learning, memory, and the generation of nerve cells in the hippocampus. It also makes neurons more resistant to stress, and all of us could use some of that. I used to study with an imam at Fajr, along with about 14 young men. They were all teenagers but me. They did not eat before they went to Hifz class. Now, how many young people want to have a breakfast in the morning? These guys did not study because then they would not be alert. They did not eat because they would not be alert. But they would eat donuts afterwards. Mark Mattson, a professor of neuroscience at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, who serves as chief of the Laboratory of Neurosciences at the National Institute on Aging's research posits that cutting your energy intake by fasting several days a week might help your brain ward off neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. At the same time, that should be, I don't know why I didn't take the corrections, improving memory and mood. Johns Hopkins Health Review, spring and summer 2016. So the things that we've known for 1440 years Islamically, they're just discovering it now. Some believers are at spiritually sensitive levels, whereby they are aware that when they eat excessively, that they may do something in their heart without Allah. that maybe for one moment they would forget Allah. They feel this loss of connectedness, and they feel the weight of the load of the low base self and the gravitational pull of the sin of overindulging. So, next slide, please. This is also true about our whelms, impulses, indulgences, and worldly appetites, whatever they may be. Whenever we indulge in them excessively or freely, we lose that personal, emotional, experiential awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which usually leads us to sin and harshness and hardness of the heart. So we should be highly aware of our whelms, our impulsions, our compulsions. Am I bringing them into submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or am I serving them? Are they my Lord? And they say to me, I want to eat the whole chocolate cake. And then I do it. I serve my nafs. My nafs says, I want to go. I know it's an R-rated movie, but I want to go. And then you serve your nafs. One of the great scholars said, if a person, especially those seriously in the path of Allah, if they eat to fullness, shabi'i, right? Shaba. Eat until they can't eat anymore. One day, part of their aql, that which restrains and holds them, part of their aql will leave them forever. This is spiritual knowledge that we should be saying, Alhamdulillah. Oh, thank you, Allah. Now I have the keys to get spiritual knowledge. Ya Allah, thank you, Allah. Another great scholar said, never shall wisdom find an abode, a home, for itself in the stomach that was filled with food. Again, folks, I'm not talking about diet. I'm not talking about what somebody weighs. I'm talking about what Allah and His Messenger has taught about restraint. I'm teaching you how to attain spiritual intelligence, Aql Q. I'm teaching you how to attain understanding. It was said about Imam al-Hasan al-Basri, a tabi'i, one who lived in the era of the companions of the Prophet, who was considered one of the foremost, perhaps the second in the entire generation of the tabi'in in terms of knowledge, devotion, wisdom, hikmah, and love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we see him, Al-Hasan al-Basri, we remember Allah. When we see him, we remember Allah. Insha'Allah, it should be the goal of every one of us that when people see us, we live a life in such a way that people are reminded of Allah. This would be the greatest compliment that one could ever get, is that when I see you, I am reminded of Allah. Imagine that. If you do not have Aql Q, will you be ever of that maqam, of that station? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this reverence and awe in him, that when anyone saw him, they would remember Allah and feel humbled. Al-Hasan al-Basri was nursed. He drank the milk of one of the mothers of the believers, one of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Scholars said that the hikmah, the wisdom and the beauty of Al-Hasan al-Basri must have come from that barakah. And this is what he said about Aql. This is an average rule, he said. By Allah, whenever people develop big bellies, they have lost some of their Aql. Not intelligence up here, but Aql Q. High IQ doesn't mean you have high Aql Q. There are many scholars that have memorized the Quran. They have great, vast knowledge, but they fall. Every couple of years we hear of one. They fall because they didn't have Aql Pure. They did not truly have understanding with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they must have served their nafs, their appetites, their compulsions, their whims, or they would never have done what they did. When we eat with our nafs, we will eat to fill our desires and voids. When we eat from our hearts, we eat less physical food in order to get more spiritual food, aql. What if we ate from hearts driven by the desire to attain taqwa? The one who ate from his or her heart is spiritually healthier. When we eat more from the heart, we are aware of the na'amah, the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we are in praise of Allah before, during, and after. So before I sit down, I say Bismillah. In the name of Allah, by Allah, I have food. And while I'm eating the food, I'm aware of all the miracles, the mu'ajizah, of all how that food came, all that Allah did to get that food in front of me. And when I'm finished the food, I say, "Yo Allah, thank you." How many of us, when we get to that food, our nafs is so excited, our whims and our compulsions are so excited, we don't even think about Allah. We just think about how quick can I get it in my mouth. With this consciousness, we eat more in accordance to our spiritual need than our lower physical desires. We eat to the extent that it is halal and moderate. Imam Shibli, one of the students of Imam al-Junaid, and his companions, may Allah be pleased with all of them, said, "Never did I hunger one day for Allah the way he did it, how he did it, with the drive he did it, how much he ate when he had his iftar," all of that is included, "except that I found a gate to open inside my heart, to open of wisdom and of lessons that I have never seen before, that I have never experienced before." So if you want to have lessons, if you want to have experiences with Allah like you have never had before, what is the prescription? Fasting. Restraint, obeying Allah. If our aql is strong, we will spend our mornings, afternoons, and evenings in remembrance of Allah, and that will be our food. My food will be what feeds my heart. My table will be that place where my Quran lies. My food will be maybe my dhikr beads, or my fingers. Our hearts and our tongues will be with Allah. The likelihood of this experience is enhanced by eating moderately, fasting, praying, making dua, paying zakat, and dhikr. And I would ask myself, and I would ask you, how often is my tongue being used to worship? How often is my tongue being used to worship? And how often am I not restraining my tongue and I'm speaking frivolities and vanities? Stuff that has absolutely not going to benefit me in any way, shape, fashion, or form. Even in this world. Who does it serve and who is it devoted to? Part of that dhikr of Allah is always obedience of Allah and His Rasul. Externally and then internally, we continue, and with that we fast and hunger for taqwa. Oh, if we had the same appetite for taqwa that we did for chocolate cake. Imagine. Or whatever your favorite food is. Whatever your favorite thing to do on this earth is. Some people might say the favorite thing for me to do on earth is to have an aerobics class. Imagine if we hungered for Allah, if we desired for taqwa like we desired to get to that yoga class. Imam Shibli said, the person in his awal said, when I hunger just for one day for the sake of Allah, Allah opens my heart gates of wisdom and gates of learning never experienced by me before. This is the key, folks. This is the key to spiritual acuity, to Aql acuity. Eat to satiation and take an exam, yes or no? Eat to satiation to memorize Quran, yes or no? Eat to satiation and go to Salat, yes or no? Eat to satiation and go for Salatul Taraweeh, yes or no? Angels know Allah best. We are striving to be like the angels. And guess what? They do not eat. I'm not saying that you should not eat. That would be contrary to the Quran and the Sunnah. Allah made us different than the angels. We are of matter and we need to eat. But Allah gave us laws for that. He gave us conditions for that. We need to eat to live. We don't need to live to eat. But it is not part of the modern Muslim character or the Muslim character period to live to eat. Our eating must be in a way that we evolve in our Aql, our spiritual intelligence and implementation. The more spiritually aware we are, the more less is going to be enough for us. Non-Muslims will say, oh my God, man, how can you fast for 29 or 30 days? And even the least of Muslims do this. In countries highly populated by Muslims, alcoholics will fast in the month of Ramadan. This, in the world of psychology, in the world of chemical addiction, is unheard of. It's absolutely like floors every psychologist, therapist, social worker in the world. But it is a fact. The ones who fast with the prescribed conditions, they have more realizations of how less they can eat for sufficiency and still remain strong and have the presence of their soul and hearts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we eat more, we are more prone to disobey Allah. The first gate into the world of disobedience is to have more than enough to eat. The first gate into the world of disobedience is to have more than enough to eat. The first gate into the world of disobedience is to have more than enough to eat. The first gate that opens to the disobedience of Allah is when people are full in their bellies. When people are hungry, whether it is materially or physically, they plead to Allah. They are humbled. They are connected. When a man and a woman doesn't have, what do? They cry out to Allah, oh Allah, I don't have anything to eat. As soon as you give them a month's supply of food, what do? Do they ask Allah anymore? No. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that if you give a man one mountain, he will want a second mountain. Actually, it's a mountain of gold. Let me correct myself. If you give the man one mountain of gold, he will want a second mountain of gold. But when they work hard and are deluded to believe that the fruit from their work is because of themselves and not Allah listening to their hunger, we get proud and we stop hungering for Allah. We are satiated by the dunya and the physical, and we forget the spiritual. Our faces change in the process. We begin to look big and arrogant. and we laugh real boisterous. But when you're hungry, do you laugh that way? Nothing's funny when you're hungry. Not much. Humility and innocence have left us, and we find it distasteful. It doesn't suit our appetites. The more we eat exaggeratedly, the more we exaggerate, lie, and commit sins. I used to be in the restaurant business before I was an imam. And it was interesting to watch people. The more they ate, the louder they got. And if they had a little to drink with that, they even got louder. And they bragged more. And their stories became more and more exaggerated. The more they ate, they got exaggerated, and so did their stories. People get lax in their salat and say, I have to take care of my dunya. They will even reiterate, didn't Allah say we should take care of our dunya? Their favorite verses after the prayer disperses, man can go out in the world and work. When they were hungry and not satisfied, they were connected to their Lord and addressing their duties to Allah. They don't do it anymore because they are full. They have a lot to eat, and spiritual and physical destruction begins. Prophet Yusuf A.S.L.A.M had all the riches of Egypt when he was the caregiver for Egypt. He was the minister of agriculture, and with all of that, at that time, he used to fast a lot and eat less. And they said to him, why do you do that when all of the treasures of Egypt are under your feet? He said, so that my heart softens and that I do not forget the orphan and the needy. So that my heart softens and I do not forget by being hungry that there are those who are hungry and don't have a choice to be hungry. The fasting one has a choice to be hungry, and it is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have a home to go back to, folks. When Taraweeh is over, inshallah, you'll be there. We have a place to go back to and eat. But the orphan, the needy, the poor and the destitute, the homeless, don't have a home to go to. The more I fill up, the more I am prone to disobey Allah. The Nun al-Musri is related to have said, I committed a sin. This does not relate to the sin that you and I commit. When the Nun said, I have committed a sin, it was said that he was referring to 1 minute when he forgot to be in the remembrance of Allah. Sins are of different levels and different for believers with differing levels of Aql. If they looked at a person and despite themselves there was a feeling of unnecessary disrespect for a person, they repented to Allah for that and said, I have committed a sin. Imagine having this level of Aql, folks. That the moment that I might say something disrespectful, I would immediately retreat and ask Allah to forgive me. Persons at this level say, I have committed a sin, when, for example, they did not do something that is mustahab, something that is recommended and virtuous, something that is sunnah, not something obligatory. When people of this aql, this spiritual intelligence, commit something distasteful, makruh, which is not haram, which is not forbidden, they say, oh, I have committed a sin. He said, whenever I have eaten to satiation, I have disobeyed Allah, or I have felt the temptation to disobey Allah. It is either makruh, distasteful, reprehensible, or haram for Muslims to eat to satiation. Rasulullah ﷺ was sitting with people one time, and a man who was ignorant, perhaps a Bedouin, was in the group burping in front of the Rasulullah ﷺ. And this is a reprehensible act to the Messenger of Allah. Rasulullah ﷺ said, stop your burping in our presence. Didn't you know that the people who eat often to satiation in this world will be the people in the hereafter to live in long periods of hunger in the day of judgment? The more that we eat to satiation in this dunya, the more we will be hungry in the akhirah. The ulama say it is reprehensible, makruh at least, to eat regularly until satiation. A believer should not eat until they are full. That's what animals do. You give animal, they just eat and eat and eat and eat. And then you see them swell from their food. Rasulullah ﷺ is related to have said, we are supposed to be an ummah, a nation. Our characteristic is this: we do not eat until we are hungry. People say, oh, alhamdulillah, I practice the Quran and the Sunnah. It doesn't take long to be around them when you will find they don't know the Sunnah when it comes to the rules of eating and fasting in Islam. And I'm preaching to me, by the way, as well. How many people eat when they're not hungry? Just because we get together, let's eat. If you want to get people to come to a meeting, it's a known fact nowadays, they feed them. No, the Quran is not enough. No, I will give you spiritual food. No, I must have physical food or I'm not coming. We attract people to meetings by offering them food. Even nowadays, there's iftar hopping. I hear it. They say, oh, I went to that masjid. Oh, man, that iftar was terrible. All they gave you was rice. So they go to another place. They're not looking for the spiritual aql cue. They're looking to satisfy their bellies, their nafs. Oh, I went to that masjid. MashaAllah, they had this and this. Oh, but I went over there. I'm going to go back there next week because they've got this. Is the focus on Ramadan. Ramadan is about not eating. It's about abstinence and restraint. Doesn't that mean if I'm hopping around looking for it that it's an idol? Allah has the most productive food for us. It is the Quran, Sunnah, Salat, Dhikr, etc. Mom yells from the kitchen, it's time to eat. Everybody come to the table, you have to eat. My mom used to stand at the bottom of the stairs and yell this up to the top of the stairs as if she had a megaphone. Mom, I'm not hungry, but you have to eat. You have to eat 3 times a day. We even have to carry a bottle of water around with us now. Most everywhere you go in the United States of America, there are fountains. But we have to carry a bottle of water with us because we have to satisfy that belly. Do we carry our dhikr beads? Do we remember to praise Allah? Do we remember to carry our Quran with us? It is simply the power of commercials which make you and I carry a bottle of water. In 2015, 14.2 billion in wholesale bottled water market. Global market for bottled water, 170 billion in 2014. More money than they sell Coca-Cola and Pepsi, folks. We're paying to ruin our environment with plastic bottles. We're paying to destroy the universe. Why don't you carry a dhikr bottle? At least we get spiritually hydrated. Marketers just want you to buy. They want to plug into your compulsions, your whims. So now they make water with a little squirt of this, and a little squirt of that, and a little hint of this, and a little essence of that. And we want to be cool, so we buy it. What if we wanted Allah and the truth, the haqq? For the person deprived of the heart, food and drink is the only thing they think about. Wherever I go, I have my food with me. I don't need to carry it in my hands. I drink dhikr of Allah. I drink salat, and I don't need more than is necessary. I drink Quran and I eat Quran until I get enough. We do not eat until we feel hungry. And when we eat after we are hungry, we do not eat until we are full. The essence of eating, the spirit of eating, is to eat a few morsels, even to keep the child of Adam healthy and strong for service to Allah. He says after that, if it becomes mandatory to eat more than that, then most moderate way is 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. We are the people of al-mizan. We are the people of balance. And the balance for a Muslim is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Where do we begin? Some very generous people will tell you, but you see, you are sitting in the masjid and you are close to each other, and then the king comes. Would you find a seat for him and place for him? Yes, of course, we would make a place for him so that he can sit. And they tell us to say, when he says, I'm full, oh no, here's some dessert. 3 of them, 4 of them, 5 of them. So make peace. Oh yes, he is the king. Space, I meant to say. Oh yes, he's the king. I'm going to make space for that extra dessert. When we eat, we do not eat to satiation. Not only is the messenger of Allah teaching us about the physical merits, the health merits of these wonderful modalities of eating, but he is telling us that when we do not adhere to this way, the sunnah, that there are consequences, including the propensity to not obey Allah and strengthening of the nafs and the hardness and harshness of the heart. If you find that you have hardness of heart, examine if you are obeying the rules of eating according to Islam. If you find that you're a tough person on people, examine if you're obeying Allah. We strengthen the ability of the shaitan to move in our blood and weaken the ability of the angels to gain access to our heart by eating excessively. The Nun said next, eating more and not eating moderately and not fasting in life is not hungering in the path of Allah, and it will lead to spiritual degeneration because of the internal discourse and the movement of the shaitan inside of us. The more we fill ourselves, the more it takes us to the extreme limits of the whisperings and the suggestions of the shaitan, and the noise and discourse inside of us is negative and spiritually destructive and toxic. Now we know that in the month of Ramadan we won't be able to blame the shaitan because he's chained up. So then if we do it, we have to blame ourselves. I did this. And Allah is showing me my nafs so that I can change and improve. One last little thing I want to share with you before we move to the questions. Yahya Razi is related to have said, the whispers of shaitan, imagine they are creatures roaming and flying around your heart, waiting to land and looking for a place to land in your heart. He continues to say, if they find or see in your heart gardens of hunger, with that proper kind of hunger, with juices of flowers and roses of iman and faith and taqwa, Allah consciousness, and tawakkul, reliance on Allah, and dhikr, remembrance of Allah, and of ilm, knowledge, and of marifah, knowledge of spiritual truths, and nearness to Allah, and love and compassion, if these beautiful feelings and internal modes are found in your heart, he says, if Shaitan's whispers fly around and they see that type of garden, the garden of spiritual hunger, they evanesce, they dematerialize, they disappear, they lose their way. By us indulging in our whims and our compulsions and our food, we are making a garden for Shaitan. We are saying, here, I got a banquet for you, Shaitan. That's what we're doing, folks. And only if we have Aql Purifies will we ever get away from that. If they find the landscape and garden of satiation, they land, they find refuge, and they grow to become bigger and bigger. fasting on a weekly, monthly, and special time annually, receiving only the minimum of physical and material things with the proper conditions, will make us remain constantly in the remembrance of Allah and alleviate the whispers in our heart. Imam Shibli said, if a person forces him or herself to be hungry in the legitimate way of fasting, that person who does that will be helped to sever the whispering inside of him or her, and to the extent that they have fasted properly, and to the extent to which those whispers disappear, he said that even in some cases where a person has lost their mind, possessed by jinns, if he or she fasts properly, they will all disappear with the remembrance of Allah and fasting. This is what the scholars said about eating and about fasting. So if we have demons today, and I'm not talking about the possessed kind, I'm talking about the kind of demons we talk about in therapy. That's one of my demons, they say. Then fasting, this is the way to get rid of it. The whispers are like the seeds of the shaitan, and the seed needs soil in which to grow. What would be the water for the seed of the whispers of Satan and the soil for that? Satiation, lots of eating and indulging in physical and material appetites. Your enemy is shaitan. Don't mind the acts of your enemy and don't busy yourself preparing to answer them or feed them. Busy yourself loving your beloved. Don't entertain those thoughts. Resist them. Seek refuge with Allah from them. And don't give them any importance. Instead, busy yourself loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in dua. Disengage from everything except Allah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Fasting for Allah and remembrance of Allah is a means in which to disengage from the dunya. Be in the constant presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Strive to do so through fasting and remembrance and dua to Allah instead of worrying about how to feel with these whispers. Lead the dog to the shepherd. If the dog comes barking at you and attacking you, don't throw stones at him. He will only bark more. Instead, call the shepherd. Tell him, please protect me from this dog. It is your dog. The shepherd is Allah, and we turn to Allah and Allah's messenger. The shaitan is but a creature of Allah, in the possession of Allah. So we ask Allah to take care of him. And we do our part by not leaving a whole banquet for him. O Allah, you ask me to mind my business by loving you and worshiping you. Help me do that, and I know you will take care of this dog, this demon. Ignore him, ignore it, ignore them, whoever your enemies are, and obey Allah. Busy your heart with Allah. Allah will take care of you. The whispers of the shaitan should not be given soil and should not be watered to grow even more and further, my beloved brothers and sisters. So we know that in the month of Ramadan, in the month of Rajab, we start taking the weeds out and purifying the soil, creating the space that in the month of Sha'ban, we are watering it. We do not water it with physical food, not spiritual aql. Aql Q. The Messenger of Allah is related to have said, verily shaitan runs inside the human being along the passageway of blood. Where does blood go? Everywhere. Blood goes everywhere. To your brain, to your heart, everywhere from the crown of your head to the tip of your toes. And he says, shaitan has this capacity to run inside the human being in ways beyond description as the blood runs inside the human being. The scholars of the heart have said connecting the physical to the spiritual by hunger, eating moderately, and fasting restrains and constricts shaitan's pathways. The more you eat, the more running blood, physically speaking, moves to you, in you. The less you eat, the less activity of the blood, and therefore the less the activity of the shaitan. That's how they connected the physical to the realm of the spiritual. Fasting for the sake of Allah indeed is a means spiritually, not only physically, for so many things that we have mentioned, including and particularly the control and the prevention of the whisper of the shaitan inside of us. And the whispers of the shaitan inside of us can express themselves in so many different ways, including some of what are called illnesses due to satanic presence, quote unquote, exorcising Satan out of me and out of you, not by an exorcist, but by fasting. The heart says that it will not remain a problem in us if we avoid eating excessively and we fast with the proper conditions. La ilaha illallah. No one has control over me, inside of me, except Allah. With La ilaha illallah, there is no need for anyone or anything else. I am full with just that. That is my all-you-can-eat banquet. La ilaha illallah. Psalm, dhikr, and dua is all I need. Allah, purge our hearts from anything other than you, Allah. Give us happiness in you, Allah. Give us freedom in you, Allah. Give us dignity. And let us fast for you, by you, and in you, insha'Allah, Rabbil Alameen. So, I love you all for the sake of Allah.